What's going on, everybody? We are live with Richard Fox today. I am Josh Hayes here with my co-host Scott Moon, and we are talking to Richard Fox, the author of the Ember War Saga. Richard he's graduated from the United States Military Academy, or West Point. He spent 10 years on active duty in the U.S. Army, where he was deployed twice to Iraq and received the Combat Action Badge, the Bronze Star, and the Presidential Unit Citation. Currently, he lives in Las Vegas with his incredible wife and two boys that, strangely enough, are bent on anarchy, and most kids, I think, are more well-behaved than that. So, welcome, Richard Fox. Thanks for being on the show.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, Richard. I'd like to kick it off. We usually get started with a pretty basic question. We'll go with if you can tell us kind of a little bit about yourself and how you got started, and then maybe something about kind of your background that
Sure.
influences your writing.
I've been writing full-time since October. Before that, I dabbled for many years, like most people. And the first thing I ever really wrote was a movie script about the Red Baron, and that came about where I just come back from Iraq. My first tour, I was hanging out with my brother, watching the History Channel, and he looked at me and said, "You know, there's never been a movie about the Red Baron." And I was like, "Oh, you're right. We should write that." And turned out there had been one before, and then the Germans had the nerve to go and make their own movie.
That's crazy.
Oh, those Germans.
Those Germans. And so wrote a screenplay for that, and kind of caught the writing bug through that avenue. And after trying fairly miserably to do anything in Hollywood, I figured, well, if I write novels, probably would be a little bit easier to get started, and then let Hollywood come to me, which has not happened yet.
Yes, but it will.
Movie scripts are tough. I remember I think it was in James Scott Bell's book. He talks about living in Southern California and said that since he lived there, anybody in L.A. with opposable thumbs has to write a screenplay. There's a lot of competition in that field. Did you do anything to get to write a screenplay? Did you already know how to write one, or?
I had no idea. I just bought a bunch of books on just the formatting was the big issue.
Right.
For that, and some software, and then Bob's your uncle, and the story happens. So, but I picked up my first books on craft is when I got started when I was looking at screenplays.
Right.
People, and I think one of the better books on craft I've ever read was Writing Comic Books by Peter David. And you think, well, comic books? No, but it's he puts all the things out there: characterization, structure, pacing. All those, really important things for writing, Peter David has in there. And in comic books, still, you're still telling a story, just slightly different medium.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think comics, if I remember correctly, are very similar to screenplay as far as the format for how you write them, and you give basically directions like almost to your videographer, it's to your artist how to make everything look.
Right.
So after the Red Baron, you got started on some other books and series.
After the Red Baron, I wrote a comedy script, and then I got deployed again, and so the writing had to take a back seat for a while. And I didn't write for a long time until I came across a blog post by Joe Conrath, where he laid out, here's how self-publishing is happening now. Here's how the gatekeepers are gone. Because when I was, I had some experience with trying to get the Red Baron made, and boy, there were getting over those hurdles. You talk about gatekeepers. Hollywood has got some serious gatekeepers.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, because even if they option your book, it just goes into a warehouse and sits there.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, heck, Hugh Howey, he's had his stuff optioned. It's not happened yet.
Right.
Yeah. If anyone you think it would happen to, it would be him. But.
What's funny is he got his option for Wool before Andy Weir got optioned for The Martian, and you can see whose movie got made. But,
yeah.
And the result.
You said right in the beginning. You said you got started in October. What year was that?
Probably 2006. I want to say when I started writing.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I was writing full time in October of last year.
So 15.
Yeah.
Well, when did you start? But you started writing in 06.
Right. Yeah, the first few things. I first got seriously writing was probably about January of 2015. Is when I was really cranking out words and stories.
Okay. And did we talked about your Red Baron screenplay that you did turn into a novel? You wrote 3 other genre fiction novels that weren't the Ember War before you started the Ember War series. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or do you want to talk about those at all?
The first long novel I wrote was military fiction, set during the Iraq War, and I thought that my background, okay, 2 tours overseas in Iraq, I thought readers would gravitate to this kind of experience and want to learn more. Not the case. So I wrote 4 stories in that series, and then after many months of not having success in the way of sales, I switched genres after a writer mentor of mine suggested I look at something else.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that? How did that happen?
Yeah, let's see, Russell Blake, USA Today bestseller.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Everybody knows Russell Blake.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he and I we're friends on Facebook. We message each other, and I like him because he and we can disagree on something, and we're still friends. It's like we're adults or something,
There's a very rare thing. There's a shortage of adults that can disagree and still agree.
So he had one of his regular blog posts about this is how he does things and what it takes to be successful, and I was complaining to him like, oh, I'm not selling 100 copies a month now, poor me, which doesn't help. And he said, well,
that's always worked for me in the past too. It's a great tactic.
Yep. So he suggested, well, have you ever thought about writing another genre? And then boom, there goes the light bulb. And I'm like, well, let's see. I've loved Star Wars since before I could walk. I read military science fiction constantly. Why don't I write something like that? And then that led to the Ember War and the 6 books that have come out since.
It's a fantastic series. We'll probably spend most of the rest of the interview talking about that. I don't know, but it's pretty impressive. You're talking about your script. I wrote a book. The story, my main series, I wrote as a screenplay, and then I novelized it. And I had some pain trying to go from screenplay to novelization. Was that an easy process to go from? Because they're written in different points of view and all kinds of things.
Sure. I mean, my point of view when I write it kind of holds to screenplays in that I don't put people inside, the characters' heads too much.
Right.
Which is forbidden in screenplays. You never do that.
Right. You can't.
Put it on camera. So if it can't, for screenplays, if it can't see it on the screen, you don't put it on the page.
Right. And it's about 1 minute of screen time per page or something like that. Yeah.
So, but for writing a novel, it's like, oh, now I can finally put in, some emotion. I can give clues to the reader, like this is how this guy's feeling, and then, I don't say he's sad. I'll put in some sort of action.
Right.
Showing it and getting some background world details and stuff like that.
That's actually a very pro thing to do because I see a lot of beginning indie or beginning writers, period, it doesn't have to be indie, who after every dialogue say, he said, he said, he said, she said. I'm like, you don't have to do that. We know that she's talking.
Especially if there's just a couple of characters in the scene and you set it up right.
So the Ember War was your first book in this series, this military sci-fi series. You mentioned Joe Conrath a minute ago. So you're indie published. You've done it yourself. Did you ever have any thoughts of going traditional publishing? Were you always gonna plan to do this kind of indie thing?
Well, it's when I read Conrad's blog, I said, okay, if I went traditional publishing, I had the book done. It would take me 2 years to get paid for the book.
Right.
Because of just getting an agent, getting a publisher, getting on the schedule, 2 years of delay, or I had the book done, it's professionally edited, it checks all the boxes for being, a good book. I put it out there, I can just start paying, people start reading it now.
Yeah.
So
you have a lot more control over it, and I think that's something authors haven't had a chance to have, is control over their own work, which is crazy.
yeah,
Let's
and
think about it.
as far as access, if I went with a publisher, I think the only reason I would do it now is if, Star Wars said, "Hey, would you like to write for us?" Yes, I would.
Yeah.
I'll be right over. Thank you.
Star Wars, if you're watching.
Yeah.
Right there, Richard Fox.
Not
Ready to
George
write.
Lucas Star Wars, Disney Star Wars.
Right, yeah.
Which is odd to say, because I wouldn't really, you were like, oh, Disney, yes. But way better than at least the last 3 George Lucas Star Wars. Neither here nor there.
People knock Disney, but they also did Tombstone, so I mean, it can't be all bad.
That is true.
Yeah.
So with indie publishing, your first book, how long did it take you to get that process, to learn that process, to do it? And obviously this wasn't your first one, so can you kind of work us through that process the first time you went about it?
Yeah, the first thing I ever self-published was a short story prequel to the military thrillers. And Amazon makes it pretty easy just through KDP.
Right.
Here's everything you need. Here's the formatting, and I load up Word documents, and it looks fine. I mean, some people go a little more fancy, but that's not something I've done. But but all the resources are out there, especially from Conrath. He'll have formatting, covers, everything. So it wasn't. I didn't struggle too much with that aspect. So, but getting a website up, which is pretty key.
Yeah.
My website is horrible. I gotta spend some money and get that fixed. But
Yeah.
and then
Luckily, that hasn't seemed to affect you really.
No, I don't. I purposely don't send people to that unless I absolutely have to. But because I don't blog at all. So it's not like any reason for me to go look at that. No, don't go look at that.
Did you ever blog and then stop blogging, or just never was really your thing?
It was never really a thing for me, because I look at it this way: is like, I've got so many hours per day, and the more hours I spend on writing more books and getting the books out, better off I'll be, instead of let me spend 5,000 words this week on a blog post on why I didn't like the X-Men movie. Or
because nobody else has talked about that, obviously, on the internet.
How long does it generally take you to from idea, concept to publication? What's the timeline you usually look at?
It's for the Ember War. I'll send all those books. I'll spend about a week to 10 days doing an outline, where I lay out, here's every big beat, every action beat, the character arcs that are going to happen in this book, and how do I set up the next book in this book.
Right.
So I'll spend about a week to 10 days doing that, and then I do track how long down to the minute it takes me to write these things, because I notice if I say, all right, I have a 55-minute writing period, I better type like heck
Right.
to get this out.
Yeah.
So. And like the last book, I think took me 76 hours of button, chair, fingers to keyboard. That doesn't include editing. That doesn't include.
So is that 76 hours for your first draft?
Right.
Okay.
It sounds like about 1,000 words 1,000 words an hour.
I do, but it's about 700 to 800. If it's sometimes I'll get 1,100 in a writing period. Sometimes it's 400.
There's a lot of talk about, and I do the same thing. I want to write thousands and thousands of words every day. I've done the voice transcription and everything else, but really 1,000 words a day if the right words for the first draft, and you get it done in a pretty straight order, as long as you don't get sidetracked like I do with every project.
With your first draft, we talked a couple days ago before doing the sound check, and you mentioned a really kind of a unique way that you do your writing. and for those of you who haven't read the series, which shame on you because you need to be reading it.
Come on, people. Get with it.
You have multiple characters, multiple points of view. Can you tell us your way that you write and plot out your novels and then put it all together?
Sure. It's when I do the outline, I'll have the story in order. I'll have all the cuts from character to character to character. But then when I write it, I'll write just one character's whole arc. Like I'm writing Lieutenant Hale. He's one of the main characters who becomes Captain Hale in Book 7. And I just finished writing all of his scenes for the 7th book yesterday.
Cool.
So now I'm going to go to Elias, who is an armor soldier.
I like Elias.
He's pretty badass. But now I'm going to go write all of Elias's scenes, and then I'll come back and I'll write all of Stacy's scenes, and then I keep all the chapters. I have little bullet headlines, and what I'll do after everything is done, I'll take all the headlines out, put them in a separate document, and for each character they get different color code, and then I'll go back through and reorder all the scenes.
Do you do that in Word or do you write in Scrivener?
I do Word.
Okay.
So you make a file for each character or each character scene?
Everything will go in one big Word document, then I'll cut and paste later.
Okay.
So when you're writing your character, you plot the book out all the way through so you know what's going to happen. I know it happens with me. It probably happens with everybody else that writes, but you plot out your book, you know exactly what's going to happen, and then you get halfway through, and that's not what happens. Something else happens. Do you ever run into that with writing a character arc? And if you run into that, is it a pain to go back and change it, or do you kind of just go with it and see where it goes?
I've had a few little character moments where something like that's happened, where for the Red Baron, it's mostly based on fact.
Right.
But I added a few scenes just to help with pacing and character. And there was one scene totally made up where the Red Baron shoots down this English plane, and it's a two-seater, and the guy in the back seat, he keeps shooting at the Red Baron even though they were shot down. Red Baron comes around, strafes him, and his plane gets hit, and he has to crash land right next to the English. So
right.
Red Baron gets out, and he killed the tail gunner. The pilot is still alive, and the Red Baron thinks, well, it's over. We're both on the ground here. You're obviously captured. But the living English pilot starts to beat the hell out of the Red Baron. He's about to shoot him, and the Red Baron's brother shows up, who's also in the air, but tackles the guy and ends the fight. And when I wrote the story as a screenplay, and then later a whole bunch of drafts, Lothar, the brother, he just beats the hell out of the pilot. But when I was writing the novel, Lothar takes out his trench knife and stabs the guy, and I was like, what the hell? Where did that come from? And I realized that's exactly what Lothar would have done. Lothar von Richthofen, by the way, was a badass. But
yeah,
he deserves some more attention through history, but his brother gets it all. And so I get little, character moments like that. And generally, I'm not going to change that. That was neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
well, some of those are the best ones when they you hate to disregard something that came to life on its own. You got maybe it needs to go in a different story, but yeah, that's something we talk about a lot on the show about the plotting versus pansting and whether you follow those rabbit trails or not.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about the characters and writing them separately. While we're kind of on this section, there's a question from our Facebook group. Anthony Norden asks, I'll paraphrase. When you're writing for the battles, the fleet battles, do you have a list of ships already pre-made? And do you keep track of those ships through the series? And do you create new ones if you just need them, or do you have like a whole fleet already kind of designed?
I have, when I first started the Ember War, I had like a 20-page kind of story Bible where I laid out, here's how the tech works, here's the history for these people, just so I can go back and reference that. And then for all the ships, I had frigates are named after big battles, carriers are named after this, destroyers, just the kind of naming conventions. So I had all those ready.
Okay.
And then I create new, as new ships needed, I'll go in and put them in the list. So I have a list of frigates and destroyers, and if something gets, crossed off in story, they get crossed off in the.
Is there a story behind the name of the Brightonfeld?
There is. When I was writing, I listened to music a lot, and I was listening to a band called Sabaton. You ever heard of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, Swedish military history rock opera. Okay.
Exactly. Good stuff.
It's like they were made for me, and they just had a new song came out at midnight last night. I was so stoked. But anyway, the Lost Battalion, I love it. So anyway, I listened to Sabaton while I write, and it got to the point where it's like, okay, I need to name this ship that they're going to be spending all their time on. I was like, what do I go? The Yorktown, there's all kinds of, normal kind of stuff.
Constitution.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Old Ironsides, there's all kinds of options you got out there. And Sabaton has a song called Got Me Duns, which is about the Battle of Brightonfeld. So I'm listening to this, and it's like, they're all singing about the Battle of Brightonfeld. I'm like, I'll just Brightonfeld, sure, I'll keep that.
Yeah.
And then the song's name is Got Me Duns, and that was the word of the day for that battle. And because those words are associated with that battle, and I have the ship, and now I have the character saying Gott mit uns, which means God is with us to each other. There's a lot in the first book, and I moved away from it a little bit in the second book.
Which might bring us to the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Yeah. I
forgot about.
There's,
That's another one of my favorite characters. What's
Standish.
Standish, yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Damn it, Standish.
Yeah, he keeps things light, and I'm glad he's in the story.
Yeah, Luke Daniels does a good job with his particular characterization of the voice and whatnot. So, but yeah, every time I heard the Brightonfeld, I'm like, I bet you there's a story behind the name of this ship. So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, in the story, it all leads back to the European history.
Yeah.
So, and all like the other class of ships that are the Brightonfeld, the same strike carriers. You've got the Gallipoli, you've got Tarawa, you've got big battles.
Yeah.
For the strike characters.
That's very cool. So I want to move on to, before we move on to a different kind of niche, when you're talking about creating the books, indie-wise, can you tell us a little bit about the post writing? So you have, it takes 7 to 10 days to outline, and then 76 hours to write the first draft. You've got, proofreaders and beta readers and that kind of thing. Can you tell us a little bit about your post writing, how that goes?
Sure. When I get the drafts done, it goes to my main editor, this incredible woman who's very overworked, and she'll make her 2 passes on it. I'll go through, fix it, and then I get it to another proofreader, and they will go through it and they'll fix it, and then I'll give it to beta readers and say, find those last few errors that I can kill with fire. And then,
Kill it.
Yeah, and then.
How do you find beta readers?
And some still get through. They always get through.
It's interesting how that happens, but it does.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't like to go back too much. Once something's been out there for a few years. Do you go back and reread your books that you wrote a couple years ago?
Because every time I do, I just want to start fixing stuff.
Yeah.
Edition 37.
Yeah. You change that word order. Hold on. It's just.
Yeah.
So you go editor, proofreader, beta reader.
Right.
Okay. So your editor, do you pay your beta readers?
Well, how do you find your beta readers, or is that a happy accident, or did you look for them intentionally?
Most of the beta readers, they come like, hey, you got some errors in the book, X, Y, and Z. I'm like, oh, thank you, let me fix that. And a lot of times, these great people will volunteer, like, hey, I can read your next book for you. I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But I'll make them red shirts for later books.
Nice.
So, if somebody takes the time and effort to help me make the book better, I'll let them die.
They can die in the book.
I kill you.
So,
Thanks for the help, and now you die.
You ever run into issues where you've paid your editor, whatever you pay them to edit the book, and then it goes to proofreaders, and you're paying proofreaders for that specific line copy type deal. Then it gets to beta readers. Have you ever run into any issues where the beta readers catch something that neither the proofreader or the editor caught, that is maybe not a major point, but a big enough point where it's going to require some rewriting or something like that? Have you ever run into something like that?
No, never something that requires rewriting. It's never been that bad where I'm like, why do I pay this person? It's
right.
My editor and my proofreaders, they do a great job, and for a word perfect document to come out is not something I'm expecting.
Yeah.
But it's like I expect all the there errors to be fixed.
Yeah. Oh, God, I hate that word.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use any editing software like Pro Writing Aid or?
I have not taken that plunge yet. I looked at it a little bit. I'm like, wow, this is complicated, and I pay people for this, so I'm just going to not do that. And so I would much rather be focused on writing more words than,
I think it's probably a smart decision. I'd seen in several blog posts and forums that there's a train of thought of like using that so that you don't pay your editor as much. But if you write pretty clean already, and I don't know if it would be necessary. I'm just curious. I've had several people ask about those programs and if they're worth using.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't go so far as to say I write clean. I mean, I will pick up all the glaring errors that before I send it to the editor, and then she pulls on it.
How many drafts do you normally go through before you send it to the editor?
Yeah, I count the outline as a draft.
Okay.
So I'll get through 3 or 4.
Okay.
And I don't do a whole lot of rewriting, and because I'll go back in and put stuff in if the story needs it, but I've not been to the point where I'm like, I need to redo these 3 chapters.
Right.
I look at them like, you know what, this is good enough, or perfection is the enemy of good enough.
Yeah.
And if I try and just redo chapters again and again, the book will never get out. So
what?
One of the SPP guys always says perfect. Is it Sean? Not Sean.
Sean says it. Yeah.
Sean says perfection is the enemy of done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which I don't know where that quote comes from originally, but it sounds like what you're saying. It's been around for a while. I like that quote a lot.
What I was going to ask is, you consider your outline a draft. Scott and I just recently got on this story beats kick, where it's not like an outline. It's more you're just kind of slamming the story out with just the basics.
Scene basics.
Yeah. Do you do stuff like that, or is your outline like a 1AB, 2AB thing, or how do you do your outlining?
Each outline is, it starts off with a bullet point of like what the scene is.
Okay.
Stacy talks to Bastion,
Right.
and I'll put in a couple subpoints about this happens, and then I'll go through and then the next chapter line, and then it gets a couple bullet points underneath it of what happens there. So and then that way I can see the whole story right there.
Right.
I know it's like, okay, I got a pacing problem here. I need to add this character moment. Well, how does that impact back in the scene or back in the story? So instead of getting 50,000 words in and like, oh, I've got a problem, it's more, I'm on page 5 of the outline. Oh, okay, here's where I need to go put that scene back in.
Right. That's very smart. I've done that several times in previous books where I wrote. I probably wrote like 59,000 words on this book, and it was pretty much the middle of the book, and I got stuck. And I had no idea how I was going to fix it because I hadn't thought about the ending. I hadn't thought about any of the characters that I just was like, oh, this character's cool, and this character's cool, and this character's cool. I hadn't thought about any of that. Stuff. Yeah. And then I get 60,000 words in, and you're like, well, I have no idea what's going on. Start over or move on. But I get the pantsing deal that everybody wants to create, but I think that outlining or beating is, if you're going to do it seriously and do it with any type of speed and accuracy, outlining is really the only way to go.
I'm starting to be a little bit of a recidivist. I tend to outline and then pants and then outline and make notes as I go. I don't know. But the Josh knows me that I have a tendency to write like 5 projects at once. So that'd drive you crazy. What gets you excited about writing, or what's something inspirational, or who do you follow, or
It's have you ever heard of Dan Abnett?
what was it, Dan?
Dan Abnett. He is a British author, and he
Oh,
he writes for an IP called the Black Library. He writes for Warhammer 40,000, and he writes comic books. He writes novels. He's a machine.
yeah,
He wrote a trilogy about this character named Eisenhorn, who, if you've never, it is brilliant sci-fi. And the thing about Eisenhorn is, it's great. It works great within the framework, and the character starts off of Eisenhorn. He starts off a certain way, pure, good guy. Doesn't deviate. But by the end of the trilogy, he does something so out of character from the beginning, Eisenhorn, that But the way that Dan Abnett wrote it, it makes perfect sense to you as a reader.
Right.
The way it was for me is I got to the end of the book and I'm like, okay, yeah, and then I was like, wait a minute, did he just do that? And then I had to go back. I'm like, he did, do this horrible thing. I won't ruin it to this one character, and I'm like, wait a minute, this makes perfect. Why was I okay with this? This is not how it should be.
my son actually reads all the Warhammer 40K books. I mean, he reads them just like crazy. He became such a fast reader, I couldn't keep him in books. I was like, what's the biggest book? I'll get this Warhammer 40K omnibus. They're like that thick. And
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I have actually seen those, and I've been wanting to read them, but they're huge.
Yeah,
They're
but
time investment.
yeah, oh yeah, if you want to get into Warhammer, there's a lot to read. But so
Good thing, though.
So when I was reading that, and it came down to, I found that I was on this journey with the character, and at the end of the story, I was, the same position as the character. I'm like, that's incredible. I love it. So when I write stuff, I like to have, characters who go on a very long journey with the, with the reader. So. And later on, a couple of years, right before I went to my second tour in Iraq, I got to meet Dan Abnett at a conference, not a conference, at a convention. And I got to him, and I told him how much I loved Eisenhorn, and I asked him, how do you get all of this writing done? Because he was doing this comic books left, right, and sideways, and I had this crazy idea that he was chained to a desk, and his daily caloric intake was tied to his hours. His word per hour average.
Some wing succubus back there, like, right.
Holding a gun to his head.
He just looked at me in very British. He was like, "Oh, I just work very hard." I'm like, "Oh, well, how else was he gonna do it?" I mean, of course, he works very hard. And he's like,
okay, mark that down. Secret.
Work hard.
There you go.
Yeah, but so Dan Abnett, and I see all the stuff he writes, and I'm like he's good.
I'm gonna have to look him up. I've played Warhammer the game, but I don't think I've ever read any of the books. I'll have to check those out.
There's a bunch. There's several series and omnibuses and I'll check those out. So and you said reading those books and listen to Sabaton, and what else get you going to write? Inspirational or
when I was finishing high school, right before I went to West Point, I picked up Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein.
Oh yeah.
And so I read that book before I went to do anything in the military. And I was like, okay, I see how that book is. And then I finished the first summer at West Point, and then I reread the book, and the meaning was totally different.
Yeah.
I started to get it. Here's citizenship and military, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And, and then Starship Troopers, people think, oh, it's just military science fiction. No. It is all political commentary with a nice little military science fiction veneer.
Right.
And
when was that written? Wasn't that right around, right before, right on World War II, or right after World War II?
After World War II.
I know that Heinlein had wanted to serve more in the military than he was able to, and I think that left a big influence on him. Very patriotic at the time that he wrote that.
Naval Academy, he got discharged for medical reasons. I think he came down some horrible illness when he was in the Philippines, and he joined back up during World War II and to help. But He didn't see any combat, but and and the thing about Starship Troopers is that it's there's a political message in there, and all science fiction is supposed to have commentary on the modern day.
Right.
Right.
So I like writing, and it's like if I can help, or if I can put a spotlight and make a reader think about an issue, then that's great. And I don't want to demagogue and like this is the only way to think. It's more here's an issue. Let me put some stuff out there and then let the readers argue about it amongst themselves.
Well, that's a good point. So can you tell us what the issue is? Do you have an underlying one in the Ember War, or do you just want people to figure it out when they read it?
Well, one thing about the Ember War is there's characters, and I don't know if you're only 2 books in, you might not know. Gets into what it means to be human.
Okay.
And because there are these characters who are procedurally generated human beings.
Right.
Yeah.
They started with that in book 2.
Yeah.
And that's become an issue, and that's... Anyway, go ahead. I interrupted. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's a little bit more in book 3. Book 4, it's huge. Huge issue in book 4. And then you have these other characters who are called doughboys, who are basically they're just they're cannon fodder. Not, they're not very bright. They're big and stuff. They become in minutes, and they're not the sharpest tools in the shed. So it comes down to there's the discussion of like you're just making these people to be cannon fodder, but are they really people? You have all these procedurally generated human beings. Are they really people?
Right.
And then
that's interesting. I really can't wait to finish out the series. You say that the next audiobook's coming out the 1st of July, right?
July 5th.
Okay. And for those of you that watch the show all the time, Scott and I are huge Audible fans. We listen to books all the time. The first 2 books in the Ember War series have been put together in a publisher pack by Podium Publishing for the audiobook. Luke Daniels did the narration, and he's a fantastic narrator. Can you tell us a little bit about how that got picked up for Audible? Because
Sure.
Podium Publishing, when they do their audio, but you can't submit to Podium. They come and they find you.
When I first heard of Podium, I looked all the website. I was looking at all these different ways and how to contact him, and I was like, this just doesn't make any sense. And then I eventually learned that they seek their talent.
Yeah.
That you can't even go to them. So the fact that Podium's doing your books right there should tell anybody watching this show that there's something special about this series. So I'd really like to know how that happened with Podium.
I think it was last summer. The Ember War was out. It was doing really well, and I think the second book had come out, and the 2 books together were doing just great. And I got an email from Podium that says, "Hey, this is who we are. Can we call you?" And I didn't know who Podium was, but I was like, "Oh well, nice people want to do my audiobook. Sure, I'll talk to them." And because I had made a few audiobooks before that, and they had not done well at all, period. So my bar was pretty low about what audiobooks could do. And
they have a lot of potential, but they kind of hit or miss. I mean, if you get them, they do really well, it seems like.
Yeah. So I talked to them on the phone, and they told me about Andy Weir and his story. And of course, I heard about The Martian. I didn't know they had done the audiobook for The Martian.
Yeah.
And
now you have my attention.
Yes.
Nice people that promoted Andy Weir want to do my book. Okay, I'll call you back.
Yeah, it wasn't a hard decision after that. And they came to me. They sold me on what they could do, and the narrator that they were going to have. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And so that's how that came about. They came to me, and I think it was more. I mean, I didn't go looking around. I didn't try to get their attention. It was more that the books were successful, and that's what they were looking for.
Do they require you to do some interaction with the narrator, or do they just prove stuff? Or?
It was all just like, how do you pronounce this?
Okay.
And it was every once in a while. That's all they needed from me.
And it's ruins of Anthalus, not Anthalus, right?
The first Omthalos, that's how I said it in my head. But if the narrator does that, fine. I'm not going to argue with him.
Yeah.
I did have a question about his interpretation of how Elias talks. Is that how you pictured it?
This is
in
a
your
question
head
I
when
had
you wrote
also.
Elias,
Because he kind of reminds me of like a Stephen Hawking type voice when he talks for Elias.
Yeah.
I kind of had Optimus Prime in mind when Elias was talking.
Which is quite a bit different, but I think that the way it works now, it does work pretty good.
Oh, yeah, no, I enjoy it. It's just, I was wondering how, because I know, like, when I write my characters, I think of their voices in my head. So I was wondering if that voice was what you had pictured.
Yeah, but, for Elias, I always think of him, he's just this ball of concentrated rage. He's always ready to go off.
Yeah.
He's definitely ready for a brawl at all times.
Yeah, and that's what's so much fun about writing him. Is like, it's always another. And here comes Elias to make things interesting.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I like the line in there. He has a line, and I was doing it for my kids the other day. I thought it was cracking them up. It was the I left a trail of bullet holes for us to follow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that was slaying him. Of course, I will do the voice for my kids. I'm not going to do that online.
Do it. Do the voice.
Can't. Not enough beers in me right now. So. Moving on.
So you say your book was doing fairly well. You told me yesterday that book 1 did okay, and then when book 2 came out, book 2 did very well, and that's when Podium kind of took notice.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the numbers there for book 1 during the release, and how long did it take to kind of take off?
Sure. Book 1, the first day it came out, it did like 10, 15 copies. That's because I mailed my very small mailing list.
Uh-huh.
And who were all, military thrillers and Red Baron readers. But I guess, the book was military enough for them to get interested. So, the second day it did 20, and the third day it did 35, which I was over the moon. I was like, wow, it's 35 copies in this book.
Yeah.
It just came out. I couldn't believe it. And just the way the Amazon's algorithms work is that if a book, will do, better each day for a couple consecutive days, then Amazon algorithms will take it and here are people who like that book.
Yeah.
And then the book, started doing, 40, 50 copies a day. And I'm like, I can't believe this. And it did, that first book, I think within the first 30 days, it hit 100 copies a day, right at midnight. And I went over to my wife, like, honey, look at my phone. I did 100 copies. Oh, shut up, go to bed. All right.
You don't understand. This is a big deal. Yeah.
And then, so the first book did great. And then I messed up. Well, because while the first book was in editing, I went and wrote another space opera book, The Queen of Sidonia, which I love. It's a beautiful story. No one likes it. But I wrote that not knowing the Ember War was going to do as well as it did. So instead of going straight to book 2, I went off to go do something else because I thought, well, if the Ember War doesn't work out, then I've got this to try to rely on.
Yeah.
And then the Ember War does gangbusters. And I was doing gangbusters when I was about halfway through The Queen of Sidonia, and Russell Blake said, stop working on that, go do the sequel. I'm like, yeah.
Okay, I guess if you say so. So
I'm
you
not
go
gonna listen
back
to
to Queen of Sidonia at some point?
No, I finished it. And then
I didn't know if it was a series or there's follow-on books or anything like that.
No, I love that story. I love those characters, but not enough people have. There's not enough demand for me to stop the Ember War books and go write that.
Right.
When I get done with the Ember War series, I might do a Sidonia follow-up, but then
So here's a question. A lot of other watchers of this and myself might get some value out of this. So you're writing along on your series, which is awesome, and you're a breadwinner, and you get some other ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do with those ideas? How do you keep? I mean, how do you stay on track?
I get those ideas and I tell them to sit in the corner.
Put them in timeout.
Yeah. I have a spreadsheet that's got like 50, 60 more book ideas on it. And I want to write all of those, but I'm not going to do that until the Ember War is done. And it's just because I want people to here you get that closure, and I as a reader I get worried when a writer does 5 books in a series and he goes off and does something else, and I'm like, where's my closure?
Especially with a book, especially a series like the Ember War, because I'm so excited to get all the way to the end. If you suddenly took a detour and started writing with some other genre, I'd be alarmed and whatnot.
Yeah.
But that's partially important because you have a good following and you got a lot of momentum. I know in some other authors that we've been reading about, and of course you're wondering what that sound is. I turned off my air conditioner so they wouldn't be loud down here, and have some people painting the deck. And apparently they must be power washing. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's really loud in here.
I couldn't hear.
Good. That's good. Well, then get what I just said. Just ignore that completely. But there was, I think it was Chris, Josh, we had seen in his book, said if you have a series that's not really taken off, go to something else, and then find the one that works. And then,
right to market with Chris Fox.
Yeah, and then stay with that series if that's the one that is working for you. Because a lot of writers I know are in the boat where they got some things going, they're just not getting that traction yet.
Mm-hmm.
And you have 8 books planned in your Ember War series, right?
It'll be at least 8. It might be 9. I mean, I'm working on book 7, and it's becoming very long, so it might become a 2-parter, which will push the series to 9. I don't think anyone's going to complain if it's 9 books.
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah, but I'm at the point where I don't want anyone to think, well, he's just padding,
Yeah.
Robert Jordan, I'm talking to you. He's
right.
Yeah.
So.
Or David Weber, now that we get into 17 books.
Oh, gosh.
17 books is a lot of books, although I did read the entire Master and Commander series, and I was sad when I got to the last one that was only half finished. That was Nick. Have you read that series? I don't know if that's...
No, I've read a lot of his Honor Harrington books, and I read the books he wrote with Stephen White, and I did...
Crown of Slaves, and... or is that the spy one?
That's the spy one. I haven't read that one.
I like Honor Harrington. I think I'm on book 4 or 5 of that one.
Yeah, it'll never end. I think there's writers who are at least traditionally published that they run into it's kind of a success trap where they get one series that's really good and the publisher won't let them stop.
Right. I think maybe that's kind of what happened to him is because I love the Honor Harrington series up until book 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you do 10, 11, 12, 13 of the main line, those books, really nothing happens in those books.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the 2 offshoots, the Shadows of Saganami and the Crown of Slaves, the 2 offshoots, and then he has another one coming out, I think, at the end of the year or at the fall. But you're right, you get so caught up into the series and it does so well, they won't ever let you go and do something else.
Go back to writers having control of their own work and be able to make sensible decisions rather than some corporate decision.
Right.
For the next series that you have planned after this, do you know what you're going to write after the Ember War?
I have 3 really great options, and right now what I'm going to write is it's imagine 1980s V with Avatar. There's going to be I don't have a series title yet, but I know everything that happens. You have these human scientists who are on this alien planet observing this alien species that's about 1980s tech level.
Okay.
And they are they were there for a couple years and they're about to cycle out, go home, and they think another group of scientists is coming to replace them. So they're about to take the warp gate out. And then what shows up instead of another group of scientists is an invading army from the corporate sponsors who are going to go wipe out the planet and take it over, turn it into a garden park. And so those scientists turn back around and go and try to help the aliens they've been studying for so long to survive the invasion. So Avatar.
That's very cool.
Yeah, 3 books.
We'll have to get you back when you get that one going, and we'll talk about that one some more after those are out on the market.
I thought about doing a prequel with Mark Ibarra because he's got this 60-year period where he's manipulating for the Ember War, and but those books wouldn't be space war.
Right.
Yeah.
Very kind of classic sci-fi. Very Heinlein, Asimov kind of books. So.
It's funny when I found your the publisher pack, the 2-book Ember War. I went through. I was getting ready to do landscaping outside, and I knew I was going to be out there for a couple hours. And I said, I need a new audiobook to carry me through this next couple hours. And I was scrolling through Amazon trying to find military sci-fi kind of book, and I saw the cover, and I was like, oh, that's a pretty sweet cover. I read the description, and I got to the point where it says, this probe discovers Mark Ibarra, a young adventurer who holds the key to a daring gambit that could save a fraction of Earth's population. When I read that, I was like, yeah, that counts. It sounds exciting, but it didn't resonate to me military sci-fi right off the gate. So I picked it up, and I got I listened through the prologue, which was very interesting. Him meeting the probe and all that stuff, and then it jumps 60 years, I think. Well, it might be more than that, from where he goes, where he meets the probe, to where the invasion happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then that started, and so it's kind of a jarring jump, because I wasn't expecting that, because you name...
Which I would like to explain.
No, I mean, it works, because, what I was trying to get at is, in the description, you name Ibarra, and then to go from a point of view character jumping all that time, and now he's an old guy. It worked, though. As soon as I got through the initial jarring factor of moving, it worked, and then it became obviously what it is. And I absolutely loved the twist that you have in there for the engines and all that stuff.
When I wrote that, I knew if I could get, and that hurdle was coming up, and everyone who kept going after that hurdle, I was pretty sure they're going to stick to the end of the book.
Right.
There would also be plenty of people who would punch out, but I thought it was a risk, and the way I did it was, there's minor spoiler, there's this fleet is going to thinks it's going to Saturn to colonize it, and they don't. They get to sidestep the alien invasion. And the reason I did that was because that way the reader and all the characters are on the same page of what the heck is going on.
Right.
Yeah.
So when they go back to Earth and Earth is almost erased, the reader's like, what happened? Where is everybody? The characters are like, what happened? Where is everybody? So I did that intentionally, so the characters and the reader, they're like this going forward. So
it was wonderfully done. I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. I liked the fact that Ibarra knew what was going on, and then when it happens, like the setup, like the engines are turning on, and that whole where they're at the press conference and doing different things, you're reading it, and you're like, something's happening here, and I don't think it's supposed to happen this way, and then boom, it happens, and you're like, oh, it's an interesting. That part didn't jar me at all. That part was like, that is a really cool take on surviving an invasion. Basically, it was a very cool way of making the book, making the characters and the audience, like you say, be on the same page throughout. And then you get to learn about the enemy and the Zaros and all that stuff. That was very well done.
It definitely put Barra put him in a bad spot. He'd make some hard decisions, and you can kind of see the character and the rippling of that. I came to the Ember War Saga because Josh pulled up me car to car at work one day and was like, "Dude, you have to drop everything and start reading this series." So I went straight into it, and I was like, okay, and I'm cruising along, and then I'm like, holy crap, and I think I ripped through it pretty quick. So I was doing the Whisper Sync with the audiobook and the Kindle at the same time, which is always my fastest way to consume a story. So that's great that was a possibility. But yeah, we've talked several times about some of the things that draw is the interaction between the characters and just you can tell there's just a lot of background. You got a lot was put into that. So
yeah, very well written series for anybody that's looking for a new series or not sure I've read a lot of military science fiction. I've started to read a lot that is on Amazon, and I don't know if you guys have encountered this issue or not. You see a great book and you're like, it looks good, and you start to read it and it's subpar. I'm not sure if that's just because of the genre, or if as a writer I look at it and I'm like, well, this is kind of subpar. So I don't know if the reader reading it is just reading it, hey, it's space opera military, it's just going to be a good time.
And that's why one of the things when I started reading this is I've been trying to read a lot in lots of genres, lots of fiction and nonfiction, and so when I started reading the Ember Wars, I've had several books in a row now that have been really entertaining. And
yeah,
so I appreciate that as well.
The thing I was trying to say is that there's a lot of science fiction, military, adventure, fun stories that you can read out there that will just give you a good read, and if you're in it for the battle scenes and the ships blowing up or whatever, that's great. But I really, really love smart, intelligent science fiction, and this series, The Ember War, is one of, I put it right up there with David Weber and his Honor Harrington series. I put it right up there with Peter Hamilton and his intelligent level of science, John Ringo, those authors that take the time to write very intelligently, that they put characters that you care about with situations that seem like they're world-ending, and maybe they are, but they don't do sex machina their way out of it. You stick it out, and it has a great ending. Well, the books do, and it carries over to the next book. And can you tell us a little bit? We're kind of coming up to the hour here. Can you tell us any marketing strategies that you've done to push the book, or anything that you can think of that would help the book do better, other than just the phenomenal writing that you had?
It's well, thank you for all your kind words. First off, I appreciate that. And as far as marketing the book, I found what works really well is that when people get to the end of one book, they're excited for the next book.
Mm-hmm.
So having a sample chapter for that next book, which I don't have for book 7 yet, but having a sample chapter and then having that link to, here, go get the next book. And he's like, not everyone came to the Ember War when it first came out, right? So, it's been out for... Good morning, Lucas. Do you want to say hi to the internet? Hi. Go see mommy. And then, so, maybe 90% of the people who, since the books came out have bought it after that first month it came out. So they get to the book, they read it, they're like, yeah, I'm excited in this story. I've already got to the end. Oh, look, I can go get book 2 right now. And they get book 2. They get to the end. It's like, oh, that's great. Oh, I wonder what happens in book 3. They go get book 3 right there. So, I make it easy for a reader. They get into one series and they just go right through every single one. And then as for bringing in new eyes, I've dabbled in Facebook. I've not broken that code yet. I'm in Mark Dawson's course. I'm like 3 lessons in. I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm hoping that will help. And then, I've gotten a BookBub ad, and BookBub is the answer for every indie author problem. So,
yeah. So, as long as you can get in there.
Yeah. And then, about once a quarter, I'll put the Ember War back down to 99 cents and do promo on it, and that gets new readers, new eyeballs into it, because there's some people who they just don't want to pay full price for anything. And,
right.
Yeah.
And I noticed you don't have it perma-free. Is that a conscious decision that you made not to make it perma-free?
Perma-free doesn't really happen in military sci-fi.
Okay.
If you look at Amazon, you look at the genre, no one really does first book free.
Okay.
Thrillers, yes. Romance, I don't read those, but yes.
But maybe
Scott does.
When nobody's looking.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's more genre dependent for the perma-free. So.
Excellent.
And I did a free giveaway for the Ember War through BookBub, and had like 34,000 downloads. And the bump I got from sales was about as good as a new book coming out. So,
Interesting.
yeah, and I was surprised by that. So, but so I would rather not do another free book, because for me, when I pick up a free book off BookBub, it just goes in the pile. Like, I will get to that eventually.
Right.
I pay full price for something, I'm going to read that sucker right away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm signed up to BookBub, and I get the recommendations occasionally. I glance at them, but my reading list is already deep enough. I'm very intentional about my reading, as I can be. So, I mean, I got a big to-read pile.
Yeah.
So,
is there anything now after you're on book 6, you're writing book 7? I'd consider that a pro in this line of work, especially seeing your success now with Podium Publishing and just the series in general. Is there anything that you know now after 7 books that you wish you would have known at book 1 that would have made it better or more successful?
I took a break between book 1 to write that other space opera book.
Yeah.
Would not have done that, I tell you what. And it's I had the whole series planned out, because when my last civilian job, I had to go to this 2-week course, which was incredibly boring, and I had a notepad and I just plotted out the entire Ember War series. So
that sounds like somebody I know, Josh.
So I have the whole thing done. So, and being able to know, here is the final, I know what the final scene of the Ember War is.
Yeah.
So, and then I was like, okay, how do I get there from A to B? But having that whole thing planned out, it makes the writing go so much faster, I've noticed.
Right.
If you're going to give somebody advice on writing a series, would you tell them to aim for a trilogy, aim for, as long as it takes a story, something else?
Oh, you might have frozen.
My question froze the internet.
You broke it.
Damn it. Because I really wanted to know the answer to that one, too. That's important.
It's funny that you mentioned the trilogy aspect of things, because I think that the kind of going thought is that the trilogy is the way to go, and but with Richard's book, he's on book 7, and they seem to be doing very popular. I wonder if in the specific genre, if a trilogy isn't the way to go.
It seems like a lot of the stuff that I like usually has more than 3. I know I grew up reading trilogies, but now everything, it seems like it has a little bit more. And, I mean, if I was writing something as popular as Ember Wars, I would keep going until book 8 or 9 for sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I'd be curious.
We're going to, for those of you who aren't watching live, Richard's having some computer issues, so he's going to come back before we sign off here. We're going to get him back. We are doing a giveaway for Richard's book, the 6th book in his series, Battle of the Void. We will include that link in the show notes. Ah, Richard's back.
Okay, yeah. Right before I say something really cool, it cuts out. Figure.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So trilogy or series, or what's the optimum?
It's, definitely do, finish the story, but plan it out to not be, for me, I'm not going to do another 9-book series. It's just because I will do nothing but that 9-book series. Mm-hmm. And there are readers out there who love long series. There's people out there who don't want to make that commitment until the series is done. There's people who like shorter books. And so, as I write, the Ember War, every time the book comes out, there's diminishing returns with each one. That makes sense.
Right. That makes sense.
So the next, I'm probably just going to be doing lots of trilogies, maybe the occasional standalone book from here on out. So
could you link trilogies? Or
sure. I mean, I don't, but I would think that would write them so that they stand alone.
Right.
New, John Q. new reader shows up and is like, oh, what's this? Okay, and then you put in enough backstory so they don't feel like, oh, I have to go read these other 9 books to appreciate it.
Well, I had thought about writing a trilogy and then starting a second trilogy based on the same story universe, but it's like 50,000 years later or something like that. In science fiction, you could do something like that.
It's funny you say that because I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the books in your series, 8 or 9 books or whatever it turns out to be. But it's interesting that you say I'm going to do trilogies and do different sets, because I look at like everybody talks about the Wheel of Time books, and there's like 900 Wheel of Time books, and I don't want to read them because it's just too many books. I know I don't want to do the time sink into that book.
Yeah. Well, they're all very long books too. It's like 13 books, and they're all 180, 200,000 words. I think I stopped around book 9.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as like for a new reader, like I want their attention for the day or 2 or 3 it takes them to read this. I don't want them to get married to me. I don't want them to look
stay with me forever.
Well, okay.
Right.
Well, we've come up at the hour. I think we should probably sign off before Murphy kicks Richard off again. Richard, it was a blast to have you on the show. We do another craft writing show called The Right Stuff that we'd love to have you on at some point.
Yep,
we can
that'd
talk
be cool.
about different topics. Where can people find you at? Where do you want people to hook you, get into your social media, or find your books at?
Yeah, come say hi on Facebook. Just go to Facebook, type in Richard Fox author, and I'll pop up there. And that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And then for all my books, you go to Amazon, put in Richard Fox in the search box, and you will, boom, you get the whole nice list for you to see. And
don't go to his website.
It's lousy. Don't.
I've been there. I thought it was fun.
Yeah. But if I have a mailing list, and there's links all over my books and the Facebook page, and there's some nice free short stories set in the Ember War series for you to read there. But definitely read the first book before you touch those.
Yeah, good idea.
Excellent. Well,
and don't forget one last thing. Sorry, Josh. Don't forget we have the show, the promotion for this particular episode, the giveaway with 3 copies of The Battle of the Void. Ebook copies we're giving away. That will run for 15 days. We'll put the link in the show notes and probably also on the Keystroke Medium page and other places. So
yep, go and win that book because you want to read it, and then get the other books so you can read those. Well, Richard, thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. It was great to talk with you, and I learned a lot. I hope our viewers did as well. I am Josh Hayes, co-host of Keystroke Medium here on Live. My partner Scott Moon, and this has been Live with Richard Fox, and we'll see you guys on the next show. Take it easy.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.